Hey, welcome to Tactical Tuesday. This is the Starter Kit Forum, or essential group of guys that gets together, analyzes game plans, analyzes players' plans, analyzes the rules on how they apply to the game plans, and then we also field questions, and then we also look at Game of the Months. Everyone plays Game of the Month. We go over all the games and we learn from each other. That's what Tactical Tuesday is all about, learning from each other, learning from the games, and applying what rules we know. It's application of the rules. None of this is going to be in the rule book. All the rules are simply in your rule book. Highlight them and go on with this. What we're not about is teaching the basics of starter kit. We're not going to teach you what range is. We're not going to teach you what your morale level number might be. We're not going to teach you how to use Vassal. None of that is the realm of Tactical Tuesday. That's what you should know already as a player. If you don't know any of that stuff, please read the rule book. It's quite explanatory. Tactical Tuesday is for even beginner players that may or may not have played other people, but here to decipher and answer questions they might have about the rule book, about what they've read. So that's what we're all about, taking your game to the next level after you've done your homework, and then hopefully you'll enjoy your SK games much more. Thanks, and let's get on with Tactical Tuesday. Let's get to it. Welcome to another Tactical Tuesday. This week's session is going to be more of a Q&A. We have a number of questions either from just brand new players or other players, things they've run across during their games, things they need to be clarified from other Tactical Tuesdays that we've done before. We're going to go into primarily defensive fire, defensive first fire, subsequent first fire, all that good stuff with all the different types of support weapons you can have. Specifically, we're going to cover some Panzerfausts initially and how they relate as a support weapon in the first fire realm of ASL reality, and applying other applications of the rules in terms of having multiple LMGs, an LMG and a bazooka, etc., etc., and firing your inherent firepower. When can I fire it? When do I lose it? When do I get it back? All that crap. So that's a lot of the session today. We covered a little bit of the close combat with vehicles at the end in terms of generating close combat value numbers, sequential close combat with vehicles, things like that. So it's a very interesting session. So stick around. 2 times speed to burn through it. I think it's only 2 hours. And so I didn't have to clip it up. Good solid 2 hours of information. Put on 1.5 so you could follow along. And then 2.0 if you're following it perfectly fine. Some sections you have to kind of reiterate because it's kind of confusing. A lot of players get these confused, not just SK players, but ASL players as well. 30-year veterans get these screwed up. So it's not easy, but if you stick with it, it becomes clear. Thanks a lot. I put on a request of what we could possibly cover this week. Craig posted a couple of good reviews. So hopefully he'll be on his way to kind of like highlight those things. One is he wants to look over to hit of concealed units, HIP units, and non-concealed units, close combat versus AFVs, and uses of the usage of Panzerfausts and how defensive fire and subsequent first fire. The wording in the rules is very poor from an ASL perspective, simply because the terminology has to change and certain terms aren't used in starter kit, and so but they have to be accounted for. So anybody else have any questions that you might want to go over before I head in those other topics? Something you've run across, you tried something out and you didn't quite it didn't quite go the way you wanted it to, and you and your opponent were unsure of something going on, or maybe you did play something and something really became clear. It's like, hey, we did this, and this is a really great application for this. Any discoveries that you guys may have had during your games are just as welcome as the confusing things in the game. So,
yeah, I mean, yes, I've got something. By the way, can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, good. Because my, as usual, Discord chose the wrong input for the mic. So I was wondering why nobody was hearing me. So, okay, yeah, but as I said, yeah, if we got some time, I can just display it. the old for me it's the old problem with subsequent first fire.
Okay. Oh, okay. That good. We'll start with that because Craig had. And then what we'll do is we'll go subsequent first fire, and then we'll go into the Panzerfaust because Craig's question was about Panzerfaust and their usage in terms of first firing and subsequent first firing. So those will flow together. So yeah, we'll start with yours.
Yeah, I mean mine should be pretty simple to at least set up, I think. So
all right. Yeah, no worries.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, actually we can set it up. All right. I'll just throw it. I'll just throw a couple units here on the board on the map here.
And if you guys have a different map, go ahead.
I was going to say, while Mark's setting that up, can I run a quick question?
Sure.
I was. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure can. Yeah.
So it's a vehicle question. I changed a turret covered arc on a vehicle during defensive first fire and used the machine guns in that phase and paid the +2 for the turret covered arc change. And then when the defensive fire phase rolled around, I wanted to use the main armament because I had not used it yet. I played it where I had to pay that +2 again since that was the main armament's first shot since the covered arc changed. Was that correct?
That's a good question. And what that kind of boils down to is I would initially say no because it wouldn't be considered in the same firing phase, but there are defensive fire techniques saying that if you defensive first fire and defensive final fire are, quote, the same phase. So if anybody has a definitive answer on that, that's a really good question because...
I just read, I can't remember the wording in the rule book, but it said something about the weapon's first shot after the covered arc change is the only shot that applies, but I figured the machine guns and the main armament weren't technically the same weapon.
Right. Yeah, but
because that's not all right. Yeah, my initial guess would have been you pay for it. At least you pay for it in defensive first fire. But if you go to the defensive fire phase, yeah, I feel that. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah,
it was the same covered arc. I didn't change again to use the main armament, so it's. I was saving it in case he was going to move one of his vehicles, but he ended up not doing that. So then I just decided to use the main armament on the initial target.
Right. Most of the time in ASL, if you have to have memory of an event, then other than routing, of course, then usually that memory doesn't apply. I mean, just in a general sense, you know? I mean, because it's like, well, because you could have fired literally 20 or 30 other units and then come back to him. It's like, wait, did I move it 1 or 2 or 3? Or did I move the vehicular covered arc on that guy? And so remembering those values becomes the problem. And I think that's where the game has a tendency to say, okay, it's a different phase. Did you move it during this phase? And if the answer is no, then the penalty should not apply. Plus, you also have the concept of, okay, you reacted to my movement, and then let's say it's a tank, infantry unit, whatever. Let's say it's another tank, and then the tank rolls up on you, and then you choose not to fire upon it, and then he fires upon you in bounding fire, right? And then he takes a shot, and you just don't respond in kind, and then you wait for the defensive fire phase. So essentially, you're giving up your defensive first fire to be able to fire the defensive fire phase without that same penalty. You see what I'm saying? Because otherwise, you would never ever, for all intents and purposes, you would never ever fire the defensive fire phase. You would always fire the defensive first fire. You know, because if you lose that shot or things like that, and I think that's the kind of like the game balance of it. And so, but we could look up specifics on that to make sure, because a lot of times the same phase. So the same phase again, and that's the controversy. I don't know controversy, but that's the kind of the difficulty in keeping things track of the same phase. in some aspects of the game, defensive first fire, which is in the movement phase, is the same as defensive fire phase. It's considered the same phase of firing. Because, normally a unit can't fire more than one phase, while defensive first fire and defensive final fire are 2 different phases.
Yep.
So that's there's your fun exception. And
maybe I'm reading too much into it. I know they
No.
say you should take the starter kit rule book as literally as possible and try not to read things into it that aren't written. But
no, but that's the ASL rulebook as well. And a matter of fact, we'll go over one exact specific example that Craig, one of the topics that Craig brought up, and it specifically applies. And it's you don't read anything. If it's not there, it's not there, and so it doesn't apply. And because you can't read into it, because then you get into big trouble. So let me look at this the turret types.
Fortunately, it didn't affect the outcome. DiceBot was kind enough to roll low enough to get me a hit, regardless. So
yeah.
Oh, there you go. That's always nice. Yeah, I see that never happens to me. So
Exactly.
worry about I used to worry about.
I get one every now and then.
Box cars, yeah,
So
Mark, you really can't say that. I watched you shoot up Stackberg the other night. You took out something like 10 or 12 of his Italian units in one turn.
Oh, well, yeah, those are Italians. I mean,
that's in one hex.
That was in one hex. Yeah, that was true. They were all broken. It was. I was. Yeah, I was
clean them off.
Pitiful. Yeah, but he may still win. That's a tough scenario for the Americans to win. So I've taken out.
It really is. Your victory conditions are just scattered out all over the place. It's a tough scenario.
Yeah, it's a tough scenario. So now the next 3 turns are going to be running around all over the place. Plus, I've still got those 2 other Death Stars on the flanks that I have to take out as well. So I'm still not sure I'm going to win that one, but we'll see. Yeah, cannot outside its current respective must add vehicle that uses must have its FP and abounding blah 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 vehicular. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the section. As usual, it'd be nice if it was easier to find where it actually talks about applying the covered arc changes. Which is,
right. I'm looking at 7.8 right now on page 26, right-hand column. But it talks about like MGs.
All right. So the paragraph that I found was at the end of page 10 and the start of page 11 with. And it just talks about that, and then it just says these penalties, referring to the covered arc, apply only to the first shot after the covered arc change. And then it goes into some more detail. And I was thinking, well, I haven't really fired the main armament since I changed the covered arc. So you could argue that is that weapon's first shot. And like I said, maybe I've read too much into it. But
do you have the rule book open right now?
Yes.
Do you know exactly what paragraph you were reading?
All right. So if you've got the downloaded SK4 version, the very bottom right column of page 10.
Yep.
And then the paragraph, and then the start of the next paragraph under the example on page of 11.
Okay, right. Gun, right. A gun main armor may only fire within its covered arc, but may, if not a pin gun, change to CA fire prior to firing and suffering, right? Yep. Penalties apply only to the first shot after the CA change. Case 8, DRM will not apply to another shot from that weapon unless the weapon from that weapon. Case 8 is never applicable to bounding first fire. For obvious. Okay. Gun, yeah. Gun counter has a white depiction. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it is kind of one of those things that's not.
Yeah, so I just kind of saw the machine guns as a different weapon than the main armament. So
I think the penalty would apply, and this is the reason why I think so. Let's say a tank is rolling. Let's say a tank is rolling up on your Tiger, right? And then let's say you get your bow machine guns, your coaxial, and your main armament. So the movement phase, you spin 3 hex sides, and you fire your bow machine gun on him, right? And then since he can't kill you, you just sit there, right? And since he stopped or whatever like that, so he knows he expended 14 movement points or whatever the case may be. He ends his turn in a hex or a motion. So you spin the whole way around just to fire your stupid machine guns on him, and then you fire in defensive fire phase, knowing that he can't kill you. Now you've got him with 0 modifiers. You're just going to blow him away. So I think the modifier was because it's not like exactly what you said. It's not the same weapon. It is a different weapon.
Yeah. That was kind of my feeling, like I said, and
yeah, absolutely. That's what I believe it would be considered as. But I mean, I could be wrong.
Vehicle fires any turret-mounted weapon. Any of its other turret-mounted weapons must pay the same PA penalties as the first weapon that fired.
Right.
Okay. So how far down did you read for that, Mark?
Well, now I'm in 7.8. Now I'm in 7.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I think that clears it up for sure. Then, thank you.
So you do have to keep memory on that particular thing, and
I guess so. Yeah, it looks like it.
And only simply because of those things where, if you're invulnerable, you get that free shot. And to be honest with you, it's pretty easy to hit the vehicles anyway if you're the defender. But it gives him less of a chance, and it makes sense. I mean, if he's spinning in 1, 2, or 3 hex binds, he should pay the penalty. Now, if he fires on you, he can gain rate of fire, and then of course that's where your subsequent shots by that same weapon come into effect.
Right, now you don't have to. Right, if you do maintain rate of fire, then the next shot doesn't include the covered arc change penalty.
Right. Now, what he could do, I don't know if this is in SK.
You can continue spinning. You can spin again. It says, if after firing another turret-mounted weapon or MA that has maintained rate of fire wishes to fire at another target outside the current TCA, the turret DRM would only apply on the move from the current TCA to the new TCA.
Exactly. So that's what I was looking for. I didn't want to really go into that. So so if you and ASL, it specifies that it must be a known opponent you fired on initially, but that doesn't really apply until SK4, and I'm not sure that it actually makes that distinction in SK4. So what that means is, like, if you have to spin far around, like a lot of phases or a lot of turns, whether you're turreted or non-turreted, you can spin your vehicular cover arc around or whatever, fire your machine guns on one location, and then at that point you turn one more, and then you could fire your main armament at a different location and only be from that point, like Mark said, from the point where you had initially fired your TCA weapon or something like that. So it's one way to cheat some modifiers out of it, but yeah. So that's a good question.
The Richardson tutorial has a real good example of this as well. They have a little vignette in there talking about how to kill a tiger, and it talks about that very topic.
Yeah, because the tiger's spinning around, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy.
Page 107 if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Steve, I think you and I up that a little bit.
Yeah. So it sounds like this is one of
those
those
playing Borisovka.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's a good solid question, because that's going like in depth in terms of just analyzing how the TCA actually applies and all those modifiers, and because it doesn't necessarily happen all the time, but there's a lot of little things like that you can kind of fish out that you could take advantage of. Sort of like like Mark said, once you fire from that position from another one, then it's fixed from there, and if you have to change it from there, then it only applies from that location. But if you had changed everything and now you're firing everything that same vehicular covered arc or turret covered arc, then all those modifiers apply. So So for the slow turreted guns, you could really cheat at this. The fast turret traverse, it's not too much of a difference, to be honest. But hey, every +1 counts, right, guys? Every +1 counts.
Yeah,
indeed.
So, Mark, you ready with your example?
You can imagine something like a Stug, for example. I mean, if that was in effect, let's say Stug changed its, changed its VCA to fire its bow-mounted machine gun at somebody, then you could say, all right, so let's say it had changed 3, so I had to spin completely around, so now it's +5. If you want to take a shot at another vehicle, you could then change your VCA 1 hex, then you'd only have a +3.
Right.
When you fired, and chances are, as long as it came up kind of, you might be able to at least finagle the geometry a bit, so that you could say, well, instead of taking a +5 penalty, I'm going to take a +3 by turning another like DCA 1 toward you.
Right.
Yeah, I think does the target have to? The target still has to be outside your covered arc though. But I think I know what you're saying is like if it's down the A hex row and your covered arc is A and B, and then you turn to the left,
B,
then you're still on A. I think because that's still within your covered arc. I think it has to be outside. I think it has to be like, well, like the GG if you go one more. I think it has to be completely outside your covered arc. But yeah, that if it's not, then heck yeah, that's what you just spin it again and throw 2+2 out the door.
Spin it again, at least you lose. Yeah, at least instead of +5.
I would be really pissed if that happened to me in a game. It's like, okay, how stupid is that?
But as I said, I don't know if it's. I mean, it's just you pay the penalty for changing the covered arc.
Yeah, and that's 7.8, right? Mark, is where you were reading that. That's where it is.
Well, 7.8. Yeah, 7.8 was kind of part of it, but it doesn't say anything. That's where the part where it says that if after firing another turret-mounted weapon or MA, maintain rate of fire, wishes to fire another target, then you just and then affected by that. But yeah, that'd be a sleazy way to avoid a couple of
wow.
If you manage to nail that tank moving in, boy, you're gonna have a very angry opponent. I think.
Yeah, it says outside the current TCA, and the same thing applies to VCA. So yeah, it has to be outside your TCA. So that particular line would happen to be within.
Outside the current TCA, yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
and so there's the Mark Sleaze factor going on there.
Yeah, all right.
You've been playing too much ASL.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Right. Well, that's good. I'm glad at least it was there.
Yeah, it's a good clarification because they say, hey, if I changed my covered arc, again, you go by the literal term of the game is if you change covered arc, you change covered arc, and there you go. I did. So no modifiers.
Target outside the current TCA. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That's clever. Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad they put that in there. That does clean it up a little bit.
Very cool.
Appreciate you guys helping me out with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, it does seem that it's interesting though that it is kind of a memory-based thing because, like, if you transition from, from movement phase / defensive first fire to the actual defensive fire phase,
right?
Then you don't have to worry about like the number of MFs unit was in your line of sight before you fire.
Right.
So that's kind of an interesting kind of dichotomy there,
That is true.
Yeah. So, but as I said, it doesn't appear to be anything here that specifies that you don't remember it. So.
Right. But that makes sense. If you know the guy's going to stop there, then, and if he spent, do the defensive, do they roll over? Well, so does that roll over the defensive fire phase? If you don't fire in the movement phase and you've only expended 2 movement factors or movement points on my LOS, then
once you're in the defensive fire phase, you don't count. Just as like if you're in the advancing fire phase, you don't count the number of hexes, the number of MFs you were in your target's line of sight, or you were in that your target was in your line of sight. You just say +4 for bounding fire.
Right.
Yeah. You certainly by the advancing fire phase, you're never going to remember, how many hexes you went through and whether you had line of sights here or there or whatever. Oh my God, could you imagine that? Ugh.
Yeah, the defensive fire phase makes that big difference. Man, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, so these are just blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
So MPs in the forest LOS case check. Yeah, I'll have to look that up for sure. Because I don't think that rolls over either. Man, all right.
Yeah, so I hate to say it, but I'm not sure we've really. Yeah. That's why I said your initial idea of like you don't kind of carry that information over from phase to phase.
Yeah. Huh.
But
that just being the basic to hit numbers, right? Damn, that's crazy. All right. All right, well, start with your example, Mark, and then.
Mine is pretty simple, but
okay.
It's kind of the classic example that I had. So let's assume, all right, so squad moves from here to here. Okay, and so this unit here, defensive first fires. Okay,
Right.
and let's just for funs and giggles, he missed.
Okay.
Okay. Rolled my typical 11. Okay. So so he's there. So he wishes to fire again. Okay. So as subsequent first fire. Now he's outside of the normal range of the squad, but he's not outside the normal range of the light machine gun.
Okay.
So the question is can he fire the light machine gun as a 1+, let's say a 1 even shot? Well, 1+1.
Yeah.
Can he fire the light machine gun as subsequent first fire?
Yes.
Right. But as initially when I kind of was really struggling with that, whether that was true or not, I always came back to the wording where it says a defender infantry unit, and an LMG is not a unit.
Right.
Okay. Therefore, my assumption was always that no, the LMG can't fire because the squad can't fire. Now, if the squad could fire, then the squad can then choose to fire its LMGs or whatever else it has as well. Okay. But the focus was whether the squad has it. Now I've looked up. We had like some Perry says or whatever, and I guess in ASL, and he turns around and says no. It's very emphatic. The light machine gun can fire, can take its 1+1 attack at here, and then everybody is marked as final fired, including the squad, even though the squad didn't final fire. Just as if the squad final fired, but the machine gun didn't, then that doesn't matter. Both are still marked as final fired. The whole stack is marked as final fired. So, so it was just we did a big dive. That was the big dive, and kind of looked and found this, found this clarification in there, and it's like, okay, and so so at least we found it. But as I said, for me, it was like,
well, think of it straightforward, like right. So if you So the squad can use 2 support weapons, correct?
Correct.
And so essentially that's kind of what he's doing. And so a support weapon, or any weapon for that matter, cannot operate without a unit operating that particular weapon. That's why they call it a support weapon, or a gun, or a tank.
Yeah.
Tanks technically have crews in them, and if it doesn't have a crew, none of the guns can fire. So simply because the machine gun itself is not a unit. Like if you had the machine gun, like if the squad broke and the machine gun were in T3, that wouldn't be an enemy unit because it's not enemy personnel. And so that's where the definition of unit really kind of comes in. But there is a unit that may operate it, and therefore apply whatever applicable rules apply to that support weapon, gun, tank, or whatever case may be.
So it was just kind of interesting because, as I said, I had always kind of just resolved it to say, nope, the unit itself is not capable. So there's kind of like a zone that the unit can operate in, and at that point, so it's 4 hexes, and anything that comes within 4 hexes he can blast, but otherwise he can't. So that was the way I always looked at it. But again, it looks like I was wrong. So
I mean, I could definitely see that because you're saying, well, the squad can't fire, so a support weapon's there. I could easily see how that could be interpreted that way.
Right, but that's not apparently the way they've interpreted it. So as we said, we looked it up, A8.3, and definitely, Harry or whoever said nope. That light machine gun can fire out to its normal range.
Well, think of
they specifically added a section, I think, in A8.3 to say if that happens, everybody is marked as final fired, even the squad which didn't fire.
Well, think of the case where let's say that 548 has 2 LMGs, and instead of firing his own inherent firepower, he fires both LMGs, so therefore he gives up his firepower and therefore is not firing.
Yeah.
Right? But yet he can still fire those 2 LMGs at a range of 8 or technically 16 because he can go long range. And then he can subsequent first fire them again.
First fire specifically.
Yeah. And so that same logic applies in application of weapon firepower. And matter of fact, I did that in my last game. I had one squad he was just a full squad instead of 2 half squads. I just had him hold on to 2 weapons because it gave him essentially he had 4 range, and so it's like, you know, I want range out to 16. 4 range isn't going to do any good until like turn 8, you know, until the guys are here. So, but yeah, that's a good question too. That's a because that's
it was always something that just kind of, you know, I kind of really wrestled with that when I was kind of learning SK, and just kind of came to my decision about it. And as I said, Ben and I were playing, and he said, no, I want to fire out that far. And I said, no, all right, might as well look it up. And sure enough, it looked like, you know, his interpretation was correct and mine was wrong. So there we go. So fire away at those.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, machine gun, but that's what makes machine guns really powerful, is they can continue to engage at distance. And
and maybe that's another reason why they felt that it was, you know, important. But I don't know.
And sort of like what's the scenario? It's the purple heart draw, I think. When the Germans set up on board with 2 half squads with LMGs, well, the half squads firepower is irrelevant. It's the LMGs which is important, and so they need to engage at as maximum range as possible to keep the Americans at bay, or, you know, depending on what their purpose is, you know, lay down some fire so the Americans take as much damage as possible. But yet the half squads never fire their own inherent firepower. So you don't want the Americans 747s within 4 hexes of your 4 hex range. You're just gonna lose. You know, and that's the good point, is you don't want that to happen. So all right, so going with that, we'll go with that little final fire thing, and again, I mean, for those of you that, I mean, you're playing you right now, Mark. This example kind of applies to you as well. For everyone else, they can kind of ignore this next year. But in terms of fire lanes, I was watching some gentlemen play last night, and fire lanes for ASL is, in terms of first firing, the kind of first fire, subsequent first fire rules kind of go out the door with when you create a fire lane. So when you come across that in your games, if you want to generate a fire lane, just remember that the squad firing the machine gun cannot subsequent first fire. He can't just fire again. He could first fire at a target. That's assuming he's not laying down the fire. He could first fire anywhere else, but he can't subsequent first fire, which makes them more vulnerable to other units jumping him. So, but a lot of guys don't take that into consideration, and it's really not written all that clearly, but it kind of is and isn't. That's one of those things. It's one of those things where you have to read it literally, like you pointed out in the beginning. You have to read it literally, and you just have to slow down. It's like you're reading through the rules, and if you slow down in that one section, and it's like, okay, this is what it's saying, and this is how to apply it, and that came to light for me, to be honest, because I never historically laid down fire lanes, so that historically just came to me within the last 6 or 7 months or so, and in that sort of application, and only because of all the discussions we're having here, a lot more stuff starts, you know, a headlight goes over here. You know, Steve asked a question, hey, can I ignore those modifiers of the defensive fire phase? Little lights like this start popping on, and that's exactly what the purpose why we're here is, to make those other lights that will pop on, that will never normally come on if you're just playing it casually and just going, okay, I'm just going to do this, that, and like you and Stackberg, you know, that question came up and that light bulb came on. Oh, that kind of makes sense. Let's see what happens. Let's delve into this a little bit more. And that's, you know, as you guys continue to delve into the rules instead of just kind of like, we'll worry about it later, sort of thing. Then I've got a whole discussion on on some things that I might put it in my podcast. It's probably going to be the podcast, but just to kind of reactivate that. But that makes a good sense. So Panzerfaust, we'll go over. Oh, Craig's here. There we go.
That's what I was going to point out to you, Stu, that Craig was here. So.
All right, Craig. We're going to go over some of your questions, Craig. Which one do you want to hit first?
Let's go ahead and start with Panzerfaust.
Okay. All right. Do you want to set up the board? Or just you put some counters on the board to get some counters moving or something like that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's kind of basic.
That's all right. We'll just get a pictorial thing and we'll just put a boom.
Let's see here.
And
hey, while Craig is doing that, I have one quick question for the hive mind here. We were playing. Craig and I were playing S24 the other night, and He killed one of my Shermans with a Panzerschreck, but the 2 kill number was a 12. And Craig, who's been playing some ASL recently, says, "Oh man, that's a dud." But something I could find in SK that indicated that the round was a dud was for a Panzerfaust, not a Panzerschreck. And I just wanted to know if anybody had any definitive guidance on that.
Yes, the definitive guidance is we don't know. No, well, the definitive guidance is the only thing in ASLSK that specifies 12 is a dud is Panzerfaust.
Right.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yes, and that's exactly what I found as well.
Yes, nothing else says a 12 is a dud. Okay, anywhere else, like the main armaments, whatever. Okay, so literal ASLSK. Hey, sucks to be you, and your tank is, the tank now has a very large hole in its side. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah, just insta kill.
But I've known some people who'll just play, 12 is a dud even in SK. Sometimes I'll just do that as well. It's like, that way at least you're not surprised when you're in ASL. Your opponent goes, oh, wait, that was a dud. But strictly SK, the only thing that's a dud on a 12 is a Panzerfaust.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
That's a good question. That's another good question. Again, that's another light bulb popping off. Okay, it says this, but what about everything else? And that's another one of those subtleties. But yeah, it's a very good question. Very good point to make. Oh my goodness. All right. Panzerfaust, Craig.
Yeah, I'm struggling here a little bit finding stuff to put in here. Let me just.
Okay. I've got a Jag Panzer on the right hand side.
My computer's a little bit slow.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'll just do that. Yeah. All right. So obviously there's no Panzerfaust counters when we're playing, but we have those just to help us. Right. So, the American tank's moving down, and you got your squad. Let's not even put him in a building.
Right.
So he doesn't have to
worry about backblast. Yeah.
Worry about backblast.
There you go.
So
there you go.
And actually, let's even throw in this. Give me a second here. Let's make it a little more complicated. He's got a light machine gun.
Ah, nice. Okay.
So, if so if that tank's coming down the road, or coming at him, let's do this. So, he let's say the American moves first, or the infantry moves there first, and the German fires his machine gun, even better. So we'll give him a decent shot. So he does this 2 down 1 shot. The American assault moved, and he first fires the light machine gun.
Okay.
Now the tank comes rolling down.
All right.
So can he check for a Panzerfaust?
How many support weapons can a squad normally use without forfeiting his firepower?
2.
Okay. And how many has he used so far?
1.
So he is still eligible to fire another support weapon, right?
Yes.
Okay, whether it be HMG, thrown demo charge, flamethrower, whatever. So Panzerfaust is just, like you say, the hidden support weapon of ASL. So that, again, that's a problem I have playing Germans. I don't play them enough. I always forget that I always have them. But yes, so therefore, if he chooses to attempt to fire a Panzerfaust, he's using another support weapon. So in this case...
So, but here's my question, though. On page 20,
okay,
the first column, second from the last paragraph, it says a unit may not make a Panzerfaust check as subsequent first fire or final protective fire.
Right.
Regardless of whether it made a Panzerfire check as first fire.
Right. Is the unit first fired?
No.
Only his weapon is first fired. So therefore, and I'm glad you brought that up, because this is where terminology is lost from ASL into starter kit. Because there's as subsequent first fire. So the whatever. So let's do it this way, and that's very confusing to me as an ASL player, because you don't subsequent first fire a Panzerfaust, you don't sustain fire a Panzerfaust. Sustain fire is not even defined or used in starter kit. So that terminology is gone. This is sort of like a bastardization of that term. So in this case, if the machine gun were first fired, the squad has yet to be first fired, correct? So he won't be conducting subsequent first fire if he's not marked with a first fire marker. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so he has full fire capabilities of his own unit. So he could fire 4 firepower out the range of 12, in lines of sights, of course, right? Or in this case, he could subsequent first fire the LMG again. So if he first fires the LMG again, what does that do to the squad?
Well, then he's final fired, right?
Right. He's final fired. Very similar to what Mark had earlier, right? He had first fired the LMG out, and then he could I think the squad was fired anyway. And so if he fires the machine gun again, then they're both marked with final fire. And why is that? The reason why he's final fired is why. Why is he final fired at that point? If he fires the LMG at a second target, let's say he's CE. Let's see this guy's CE. That he wants to fire on the crew first before he potentially checks for Panzerfaust.
Because the rule says once you final fired, you fired.
No.
Really figured that out.
Why is he final fired? Because he's used 2 support weapons.
Oh, right.
Right, and the support weapon that he used has been first fired. So technically, that's using 2 support weapons. So he's using. This one happens to be the same support weapon. So if this is fired, and then he chooses to fire a different support weapon, in this case, he's going to check for Panzerfaust. He's going to roll his D3. He doesn't roll that. There's R1. We don't want to roll 6 because 6 bad things happen when you roll 6. So therefore, he's attempting to use another support weapon in the as he rolls the Panzerfaust check. He doesn't need to succeed to be considered using the support weapon. If he fails, it's still considered use of a support weapon. So therefore, he's using 2 support weapons. So then after his shot, let's say he misses, he'll be then marked with a final fire marker. And so therefore, if this tank moves closer, then what is his condition? His condition will be final protective fire at this point, right?
Right, but it says that you can't do it even for final protective fire.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And this is the case where a unit may not make a Panzerfaust check as a subsequent first fire or final protective fire. So I don't understand.
Well,
I don't understand how you can subsequent first fire. Let's say he doesn't have the LMG, right?
Yeah. What if he first fires just with his inherent?
Right. So the question is, can he fire another support weapon?
I mean, if he had a machine gun with him, yeah.
If he had a machine gun, then yes, he could, right? Because he would just be first fire at IFP, right?
Right. Could he fire a Panzerfaust then?
By the rules, no.
Why not?
It says a unit may not make a Panzerfaust check as subsequent first fire.
Is he subsequent first firing? Is this LMG when he fires it? Is this LMG being subsequent first fired?
Read that entire paragraph. I think it'll be. I think it's a pretty short extrapolation to saying that he probably can. It said, right. Provided a squad has not yet fired its inherent FP, it can attempt to fire a second Panzerfaust in the same phase, even if the first check did not yield a shot. Yada yada. But that would constitute the use of 2 SWs, and the squad would lose its inherent firepower.
Right.
So I think that's, in the first instance we had the LMG only taking the shot. The squad still had not used its inherent firepower, and so I think, yeah, he would have been able to go for a Panzerfaust at that point.
Right. Because the squad hasn't lost its inherent firepower. Now, if the squad fired, let's say the squad fires, let's say the 666 moves into this building, squad fires. So squad is marked with a counter. Oh, sorry. So we're going to clone that. So the squad's going to fire. The LMG hasn't fired yet. So he fires there, boom, no effect. And then he moves here. And let's say for whatever reason, the squad doesn't fire again. But yet he fires the LMG. Right?
Mm-hmm.
At that point, he could fire the LMG. Now the LMG's marked with the first fire. So now they're both marked with first fired. So therefore, his use of a support weapon is one support weapon use, and he has fired his inherent firepower. So therefore, that precludes him to firing. He cannot fire another support weapon.
I think I'm starting to get it.
So I
Okay.
think that's where this
Yeah.
little subsequent first firing. If he has full, think of it this way: a squad can fire himself and one support weapon, right? Or he could fire two support weapons, but give up his. Essentially, if
Right.
he fires two support weapons, he's considered first fired.
So he can't fire himself one support weapon and another support weapon.
Right.
And that's
Right.
Got it.
But he could fire first, then the LMG, but then once that happens, he can't use another support weapon. He can only use that LMG again, like in sustained fire. Not even sustained, sorry, subsequent first fire. So technically,
Right, since there's no sustained
yeah.
fire.
Technically what he can do here, and this is where when I was reading, it's like, this doesn't make any sort of common sense. So he could fire here with his inherent. Then he could fire here with his LMG. Let's move the Panzerfaust. Then if he moves here, now he could final protective fire, or technically subsequent first fire, right there, with both of them.
Yeah.
And then here, and then at that point, he could final fire. Final protective fire is pretty restricted anyway. So I don't understand exactly. There's got to be some sort of weird application, maybe just because the process of the wording in terms of support weapon usage, where if you use two support weapons, your inherent's considered gone. That's the only thing I can get of that. But Panzerfaust checks because you could sustain fire and subsequent first fire and final protective fire and LMG. You can't do that with the Panzerfaust.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what it's doing there. Is saying that if you're going to fire the Panzerfaust first, or if you're going to fire a Panzerfaust, you can't be in a position where you'd have to be final fired, or your squad and LMG have to be first fired, because then now you have no extra support weapon usage from that particular unit. He can't use anything else but what he's already used.
Right.
And I think that's just, I think they shortcut it a little bit too much in that paragraph, because to me, it just doesn't make any sense in the way they've worded it. Again, they don't use the sustained fire terminology, so they have to kind of clump everything in as subsequent first fire. And subsequent first fire to me means you've already fired the weapon or the unit, and subsequent first fire means, hey, it's subsequent to the first fire that you've done, and so therefore, but Panzerfaust is like, you fire it and it's done. You fire it and it's done. You don't fire the same Panzerfaust more than once. It's just another check. You're just firing a separate Panzerfaust counter. So it's a difficult paragraph to kind of wrap your head around, and but just understand that you can only use two support weapons, and if you do use two support weapons, you can't use your inherent and then want to fire two support weapons, and that's kind of what we're dealing with here. If he fires his inherent first, then at that point he's locked into only an LMG or only a Panzerfaust. And let's say he chooses Panzerfaust, right? So he fires a Panzerfaust. Can he fire another Panzerfaust? That's the big question that we're asking here. If he fires his inherent at some target and then his Panzerfaust at another target, can he fire another Panzerfaust?
I'm going to say no, because that would be subsequent as subsequent fire. I'm going to say no.
Okay, back that up just a second. Any other comments?
It'd be just like, yeah.
Okay, here it is. So it's just like he's fired a support weapon, right? So therefore, if he's fired as inherent, and this is the way I kind of keep it straight, if he's fired inherent, automatically, just to me, it's like, okay, you only have one support weapon to fire. It happens to be the same support weapon, right? Let's clone this. It happens to be the same support weapon, right? You just haven't rolled for it. So if he fires inherent, that means you have one support weapon usage after that. I don't care if he's got 5, 10 support weapons in his possession, he's only firing one of them, right? If he had a Panzerschreck, the same thing would apply. Panzerschreck Autumn, he gets the Panzerschreck and the LMG shot, but no inherent for his first shot, right?
Right. He'd be first fired.
Right. He'd be first fired.
He would be first fired.
So what he could do in this situation, let's do it a whole bunch of ways. Let me grab a Panzerschreck real quick. And okay, these are the support weapons we're going to use to try to kind of explain it. And yeah, we'll just clone them all. All right. So this is what we have. We've got our squad here. Let me move these over just a little bit. So he's got an LMG. So again, this is important to know that to go through the support weapon uses. I'm just throwing a whole bunch of them over here. So we all know that he could fire combined fire group 6+ whatever over here, and then they're all marked with first fire. That's pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
He can then subsequent first fire again with both these units. Does he have to use the LMG? And what penalties does he have with the LMG if he subsequent first fires?
He does not have to use the LMG. If he does decide to use it, however, its breakdown number goes down by 2, and its original breakdown number is an X number.
Right. So a lot of people forego the LMG, especially in this case where it won't add any more firepower. So a lot of people just say, oh, I'm not going to use it. So, but since he doesn't use it, you do not have this situation where the weapon is first fired, and because the squad already fired, the squad's going to subsequent first fire, and as you know in the first fire flow chart, once you subsequent first fire a squad, whether or not you fired any support weapons, all the support weapons in his possession are marked final fire because he's subsequent first fired. All of them are marked final fire. He doesn't have to fire. Let's say the first shot comes over here, he first fires. He doesn't want to fire the machine gun because he doesn't want to break it, and then he fires again, everything's final fired. Because he chose not to fire in subsequent first fire. You use it or lose it. Use it or lose it per process. Now, and then he's done there. So let's go into the purpose of, he has 2 LMGs. Okay? Let's say he fires the first one. LMG number 1, let me move this over just a little bit more. LMG number 1 first fires, and he doesn't fire. Right? Mm-hmm. Next one over here, what are his firing options with the support weapons?
He may choose to fire the weapon he has first fired again, in which case the entire stack is marked as final fired.
Okay.
He may choose to fire his squad as inherent firepower as first fire, in which case then the whole stack is marked as first fired. Or he may choose to fire the second machine gun that he has, like machine gun, as first fired, in which case everybody is now marked as first fired. The squad has used 2 of its 3 options with regards to fire possibilities.
That's brilliant. Did everyone understand that?
Yep.
If anybody just has a pause in their understanding of that, we'll go over it again because it's very important to understand that concept. Say it slowly one more time, Mark. But that was a perfect rendition of how to use. How to do the support weapons. Now we're just going to throw this in here. Screw the LMG. Let's go here.
Okay. So with the ATR, the process is exactly the same. So let's assume the LMG is first fired,
Yep.
and that's the only unit. So at this point, the squad has basically three options. He may subsequent first fire the light machine gun. Why he chooses to do that, we don't know. But if he does so, then everything is marked as final fired, because once you subsequent first fire anything, it's use it all, or it's either use it or lose it, and you're just marked as final fire. So that's option one.
Right.
The
Hold on, pause real quick. Do we ever want to do that? Probably not.
I can't think of a reason why you would.
Not if it's just like light support weapons and things like that. Probably not.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead, Mark.
But as I said, that is, for whatever reason, the rules would say that
Yeah.
that's what would happen. You
That's
can do
an
that.
option.
That's what
Maybe your squad has a range of 3, and you're firing at somebody that's 8 hexes away.
Absolutely. That's why you would do it.
Yep, that's the reason why you would do that. Yep. So that would be the reason you'd do that. So the Italian squad's in the scenario that I was playing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so option 2, the squad may choose to first fire its inherent firepower. Okay. Now at that point, then you have used 2 out of your 3 possibilities that you're allowed to use. So you are marked. The entire stack is marked as first fired. Okay. Option 3 is the squad may choose to fire its second support weapon, in this case, an ATR. Now you have used 2 support weapons. You've used 2 out of your 3 options. Therefore, the entire stack is now marked as first fired.
Right. And because you have forfeited your inherent firepower as first fire.
Yep.
As first fire. You don't forfeit it for the rest of the turn, but you fired your 2 weapons and you're done. Now, if this squad moves closer, like right here, because they say he fires and the squad moves here, what are your firing options now? Now remember, the squad hasn't fired at all, yet he is marked first fire because 2 support weapons under his usage have been fired.
Correct.
So he is marked first fired.
His choice now is he can sustain fire. Now he can choose to sustain fire any weapon he chooses. Okay, his inherent firepower plus the light machine gun, because you are allowed under subsequent first fire to use any MGs or IFE, I believe.
Right.
You are not allowed to use the ATR.
Nope.
As subsequent first fire, but you are allowed to use an MG or any IFE equivalent weapon.
Yeah. Let's say the squad moves adjacent.
As well as the inherent firepower of the squad.
No question. If he had 2 LMGs
Mm-hmm.
and I move adjacent to you
Ah.
or here, can he?
Yeah.
What can he fire there?
That's a good question, because I think it says subsequent first fire. Where is that thing? Never find it when you need it. A defending infantry unit already marked for the first fire may defensive fire again with its own FP and or MG.
Okay. And or, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So
MG. So it doesn't say MGs. And has its firepower halved. Okay. It also doesn't say IFE, interestingly enough here, but if using AMG during subsequent first fire, so flip first fire, counter over its final fire type of unit, and all of its weapons, whether or not they all fire. I mean, my initial feeling would be is that you are is that in this case you are only allowed to use one of your MGs. You can fire your inherent firepower and one of your MGs maximum, but I'm not sure if that's.
I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's supported by the reading by the rule as it is
Right.
written.
Because I think if you tried to fire both LMGs as subsequent first fire, you'd have to forego the inherent.
Right.
Well, I think
Right,
the
but I mean,
question
that's
here
the-
is if you even
Yeah.
have the option of firing both,
Right.
and not using your inherent.
Right. That is a good question. I don't know if that's an oversight or not.
So I guess I need to ask a question. What is it in ASL?
In ASL, I think you can. It says subsequent first fire can use all machine guns under its firepower or forego their firepower. So if you either use them with sustained fire, but I don't know. That's interesting because most of the time people don't stack them up. And but there are times you definitely do want to stack them up and use them that way. But it only specifies that one shot, though, doesn't it? So
well, in
subsequent first fire.
SK, it seems to read, can you know, as I said, SK, it just seems to say, you know, defensive first fire again with its own FP and or MG. So you can, interestingly enough, it doesn't say right. You can choose to forego your own firepower and just fire the right. That allows you to fire out at that 8 hex range, I guess. You know, the right that we talked about earlier as subsequent first fire.
Okay, here's the one liner in subsequent first fire in ASL. Whenever a unit uses subsequent first fire, it must use all MG IFE in its possession up to the unit's normal operation capabilities.
There you go. Yep.
As subsequent first fire, or forfeit their use for the remainder of that player turn. A squad may not split its usable inherent firepower from that MG during subsequent first fire unless it opts not to use remaining firepower support weapon at all. A multiple rate of fire weapon, cannot be fired. Obviously not, because you lose the rate on the multiple rate of fire. If a unit or support weapon gun it possesses uses subsequent first fire, then all unit and all support weapon guns are marked with fire. That's just normal. So anything that uses subsequent first fire that's marked with first fire and goes into to final fire, everything's burned up. So I would presume that in ASL, it because it doesn't say all MGs in its possession in starter kit. That I think that needs to be clarified, because a lot of times if you guys are dying, there might be a possibility where you have more than one support weapon in your possession, but it doesn't state that in the SK rules. And that
it just says right. It says certainly that the squad can only fire squad can fire 2 weapons, and although again where that is, who knows?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's a good question to bring up, or maybe post somewhere, because it doesn't specifically state it. I don't know if it's left out or what, but at this point, since the squad in ASL, you could use both LMGs and not your inherent, again for the same reason why Mark pointed out in the first example, he's out of range of his inherent firepower.
Yep.
And so
just to confuse us more, there's on page 19 of the starter kit rules, the squad may fire 2 weapons but forfeits its own firepower for the current and remaining fire phases.
What part of that goes? Is it under?
That's under support weapons.
Okay, on the left column or
the middle column, top paragraph.
Right.
And then read the except line in parentheses, and then
except for subsequent first fire, final protective fire, and final fire versus adjacent units. Right.
Right. So that way, and that excludes it. So in SK, you can't, because it says right there, except for subsequent fire. So you can't fire 2 weapons, forfeiting its own fire. But
no, but squad may fire 2 weapons, but forfeits its own firepower for the current player turn and any remaining fire phases in that player turn.
Except for subsequent first fire. Yeah. So it could subsequent first fire them then. Right. Is that how you're reading it?
That would be my interpretation of it. It seems like you're.
Oh no! I know what the subsequent first fire is. That's the forfeiture of your firepower. So if he fired, you don't. you only forfeit, essentially, that's where I was discussing earlier, that's when you forfeit your first fire capability. So if he fires both weapons, he's forfeited his first fire capabilities.
Correct,
So
but
when
he
this
has
unit,
not forfeited his subsequent first fire.
yeah, when he goes here, he could the squad could fire, but he would be firing under subsequent first fire penalties. And then he could final protective fire. It's not like you lose your firepower forever. It's just that you lose that first fire shot. And that's what a lot of people got confused in dealing with half squads. Because a half squad can use a support weapon by himself, right? If he uses the support weapon, he doesn't get his inherent firepower per the rule.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean the half squad itself can't subsequent first fire using his inherent firepower. So he could fire the LMG here or at range, and then when he gets closer here, he could say, I'm not going to fire the LMG because I don't want to break it. I'm just going to fire my inherent, and then he could fire his inherent at 1 firepower. That's confusing even to ASL players who've been playing for 100,000 years.
Right. That's exactly how I would.
So, but
that's exactly how I would.
And the problem with it is the wording in the rules. It says you forfeit your inherent firepower for the remainder of the part of the turn. Well, you would forfeit your first fire capabilities, but you don't forfeit your subsequent first fire, final protective fire, close combat.
Final fire.
Yeah, close combat.
Yeah,
or final fire, exactly.
Right, or final fire versus adjacent units. Right?
Yeah. So it's just it's just that first shot is what you're giving up for a half squad using a support weapon or a squad using 2 weapons. You're just giving up your first fire capabilities of that unit. But yeah, if you could use 2 weapons, I definitely think it needs to be clarified.
Well, yeah, as I said, it would be nice if it had kind of a consistency. So if you're marked with first fire, then then the idea is okay, it's exactly the same thing as before. You have 2 out of 3 choices.
Right.
And you may choose which combination you want, but or you have a maximum of 2 out of 3 choices, I should say.
Right.
But certainly for subsequent first fire, you have a maximum of 2 out of 3 choices. But you have to make that decision right there and then. And regardless of your decision, everybody's marked with final fire.
Right.
Okay. And then obviously then the same thing exactly resets, except in final protective fire, now you don't have the choice to fire your machine guns or not. You have to fire your machine guns.
Right.
So related to that, if you had, as long as we're bringing this up, if it's like that, and then you move in there.
Yeah, then do you have to fire?
Then
you have to choose to fire both machine guns and forego your subsequent and forego your infantry firepower. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think you can do the common. Yeah, exactly. So you'd have to. So he could possibly use them up maximum. It says all MGs in his possession. Well, in ASL, all MGs in his possession or forfeit their usage. So I don't know if it's partial usage that you can give up.
Let's see what final protective fire says here.
Yeah.
FPF is treated as subsequent first fire with the additional penalty. Blah blah blah. Right. Find pump break. There's no. A unit using FP must use all of its firepower and usable MG. Right. And may form a fire group with units not. So it says a unit using FPF must use all of its firepower. So I'm assuming. So it sounds like
it has to fire.
It's IFP. Yeah, it
has to fire, and it could use all usable MGs. So at that point, he could only use one of the MGs.
Right.
He couldn't use both of the MGs. He could then choose to select, like if he had a medium or a light or a HMG or whatever, he could choose one of them. But if he doesn't want to choose that one, he forgoes all of those machine guns.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting choice. Yeah, so as you said, subsequent first fire is, you said you can choose the 2 out of 3. You get the choice. But in final protective fire, you use 2 out of 3, and your choice is you and one of your support weapons, and that's it.
Right. But so I think subsequent first fire, because final protective fire, you're forced to fire. Subsequent first fire, you are not forced to fire. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Subsequent first fire, it's a maximum of 2 out of 3. Yep.
Right. So,
and final protective fire is if you got them, you've got 2, you've got to use 2.
Right. Right.
And one of them must be your inherent firepower.
Right. And so I think that if you subsequent first fired in this location here, if you were first fired here and you subsequent first fire, I think you could select just the machine guns. But then if you moved again and you want to fire again in final protective fire, then you'd have to use your inherent with
one of the weapons.
Yeah.
that you're
If you
allowed
wanted to use another LMG, you could then just use whatever's usable, and a squad when firing its inherent firepower can only use one other support weapon.
Right, but it must use that one other support weapon.
Yeah. Or forfeit it.
Or no.
Oh yeah. And final protective fire, yes, you have to fire. Final
You have to
protective,
fire.
you have to fire it. Yeah. There's
Right.
no choice.
Yeah.
There's no choice. Good distinction there. So there's a distinction between subsequent first fire, in I get to choose which one I want to fire, or I could choose them both, or my inherent and one of them. But in final protective fire, you have to, you have to
fire your inherent plus one
plus
other
one of
machine
the other.
gun,
You have
plus
to
one
fire.
other machine gun if you have it. Yep.
Right. So, very, very, very unique little situation there, and that applies to, like, in terms of the machine guns, any of these weapons on the left hand side, and this is where maybe this is where the subsequent first fire comes in. When we're all this discussion we've had up against the machine guns, how many can we fire at the first time, the second time, the third time? None of the weapons on the right hand side can fire in that subsequent final protective whatever fire.
Correct.
So none of those guys can do the subsequent. Once you're marked with that final fire,
First fire.
once the squad is first fired, yeah, exactly. And these guys, like I said, there's no real subsequent with these guys. Once he's used his available support weapons like this, there's no usage of these that I understand, because you can't. The Panzerfaust at least. These might be. Jeez, I'm gonna have to look at that because
Panzerfaust can fire subsequent, and flamethrowers I don't think can.
Right. Because otherwise you essentially what that does is allows you to use all your support weapons all the time, and he's just restricted himself by using his inherent and one support weapon. And so if he had this on him, he gets to pick one support weapon if he just wants to fire one support weapon. Now he could fire the flamethrower at one unit and then a Panzerschreck at another unit, and then he's done, and then he's first fired. And at that point, you can't fire these weapons again because you can't subsequent first fire. Essentially, you can't, quote, intensive fire these weapons because you've already fired them again.
Right. Because the subsequent first fire says you can fire MGs.
Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of the idea where the Panzerfaust is restricted. Once these other weapons have fired or are subject to those other fire penalties, you can't fire them again. So they're kind of like, you can kind of think of them as first strike weapons. You kind of have to use them first, and you can't use them quite later. Because essentially the subsequent fire, the final protective fire, think of it in terms of like desperation and engaging the enemy. Most of these other weapons, the flamethrower, the Panzerschreck, the Panzerfaust, pretty much you have to prep for them. Like, do I take the backblast? No. In that case, it's like, quote, you're stepping outside the building, taking time to engage your target. But if you don't have any time because you've been firing, first fire, subsequent fire, final protective fire, and then here he is with the bazooka, boom. The time on target is not there for those particular weapons, I guess, to be effective. And that way it might also be a balance thing where, I'm just going to save my flamethrower until I'm going to fire everything else. And then, hey, all of a sudden, boom, I'm going to flamethrower you. I think that prevents that happening. But that's why you restrict machine guns, infantry firepower equivalent in the subsequent first fire terminology. So right. You got to use your flamethrower. You have to decide on using those other weapons that are not machine guns or IFEs initially, or you're going to lose them for the rest of your fire phases.
Yep. Yeah. Once that squad's marked as first fire, yep, that's it. You can't use them.
Yeah. Now if that's only the squad is marked first fired, that he could still use the flamethrower, but once any other support weapon is marked first fired, then you're screwed.
Right. That's why I like the first fire, like IFP, first fire support weapon.
Yeah.
Then you can say, hey, I'm not marked as first fired yet.
Yeah, exactly. I usually, for me, I usually just put it on the unit.
Right. Yeah. Versus
Now if it's on top of the LMG, if you fire the LMG, then you definitely want to do the support weapon thing. That's a matter of fact. I wish the support weapon was the default, normally you fire your support weapons at range first before the squad, because just like you guys said, 4.36 doesn't have range. You're more than likely going to fire what support weapon he has before you fire him. And why do you do that, especially with a conscript unit? If I have a Panzerschreck with my conscript, why do I want to fire my Panzerschreck first? Because if I cower, I can't fire the Panzerschreck at all.
Well, yeah.
Because I'll be final fired.
Anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be final fired. So normally, if you have like to hit weapons and things like that, you want to fire them first because they do not cower. Your Panzerfaust does not cower. So your conscript with the Panzerfaust won't cower. Fire the Panzerfaust first, and then fire the four. If this tank's rolling up on you here first, check for the Panzerfaust first. Even if he's CE, instead of firing your infantry firepower on the CE crew, fire the Panzerfaust first, because if the squad cowers, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
You're screwed. And flamethrower or whatever you might have, or ATR, whatever.
Conscript carrying around a flamethrower. There you go.
Hey, breakdown 4. Breakdown 4 is still good. Your dice roll still applies, so if you roll a 7, it still applies. So it's just gone.
There you go. Yeah.
But
Could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's funny. So that's a huge concept to wrap your head around. Again, I think we covered before in other clips, but understanding the
I'll go over it again.
Yeah, squad usage of support weapons. You can't not go over it enough. Squad usage of the support weapons and subsequent first fire options, things like that, is the heart and core of ASL. Him firing a whole array of bullshit is crazy, and understanding what you can fire and what you can't fire will determine your course of action in the game. Like I said, just like Mark had with Stackberg earlier, they ran into a discussion of, okay, can I fire that LMG based on the conditions that we've come across? And that will come up very often in your games, because sometimes, your guy in the front, the HMG guy died, but the only other guy close is the guy with the LMG, and he runs up there and picks up the LMG. Okay, now what are his options? Well, we just covered what his options are right here in terms of support weapon usage, because he's got 8 firepower out to 8 hexes with the 4.67s. Technically it's 10, but and he's got rate of fire capabilities. So that's what I would think of first, is if you had an HMG, I would fire both machine guns, even though the squad is this, yields the same firepower. I would fire the LMG. Why? If I had an LMG and an HMG on me.
Rate of fire.
Rate of fire. Rate of fire capabilities. If you roll a 1 with that shot that you're coming from this unit here, you get to roll on the 8 firepower chart again, and that's huge.
Yeah.
So you roll a 7, you might not get anything, but you might get rate of fire again. That's another 8 chart at 8 range. Because your squad, once you fire, let's say you didn't fire the LMG, you fired the HMG in the squad, because that's what people do, then he's kind of stuck at that point. He's fired there, because he's fired as inherent. So since those fired, the whole stack is going to be first fired, because he's fired 1 support weapon. And he's inherent. The whole stack would be first fired.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that makes a big difference. I've run across that just a couple times. That's what I'm learning to do right now, is seeing situations like this, where, especially in starter kit, where it's, hey, I'll just use 2 weapons, and if I get lucky, I'll get even luckier, because essentially, if you have that rate of fire, essentially gives you a -1 on the next shot. So instead of firing on the 6 column, you're firing on the 8 column. So that's technically like an application of a -1 on the 6 column.
Yeah, especially in SK, since it's a little friendlier, because if you pull the boxcars, you can only break a maximum of 1 gun.
You can only break 1 of them, and the LMG is insurance against the HMG.
Yep. You've at least got a 50% chance that you don't get the HMG.
Right.
So.
If you boxcar the squad and the HMG is gone 100% of the time. But if you do the other way, you just reduce its ability to be malfunction by 50%.
Yeah.
Real big. That's the biggest takeaway. Now in ASL, you'll do random selection, and you could roll Yahtzee on it. That's 1 in 6. So, but still, you have a chance that both of them go.
Right, but yeah, you still have right. Yeah, so, but even in that case, yeah, it's 2 and 6 that just the LMG breaks. It's
Right.
1 and 6 they both break. You know, and
Right.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
and you can figure out the odds.
Yeah, all
1 and
those,
6,
all those dice rolls in that.
Yeah, 1 and 6 they both break. 5 and 12 that just one of them breaks, the other one being whichever one it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've only got a 5 and 12 chance of yeah.
So that's
there you go.
That's a concept of just like weapon survivability, especially in SK over ASL that you can do. You can just do the same thing in ASL. It's just reduce. You're still, again, just like Mark said,
You're right. The odds are slightly more that you'll still lose both. Yeah,
and so,
you can lose both.
but it's a good concept to have. So decent enough, Craig. Your next question, Craig.
So let's talk a little bit about close combat against an A of V.
Oh, this is fun.
Yeah. So I've got.
Always fun. Yeah.
This is fun. All right. Well, take your Advil.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So let's. Let me clone these quickly.
Who invited this Craig guy? That's all these damn questions.
Fun stuff. All right. So here's our 2 examples. Actually, let's put another squad in each one of these, just so it's fun.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's say let's look at going at the Panzer first. So first, obviously, the squads 1 by 1. They do their patsy. The leader does not need to do a patsy, correct?
Where are you? Oh, there they are over there. Oh, yeah. Wow. Yes. And where's that? Where's the advanced phase? Because this is the advanced phase, people, right? So we're in the advanced phase. We want to try to get on that vehicle and kill it. No, you don't kill vehicles. You destroy vehicles. So, because they're not living. So
we'll start down here with the Panzer.
And
so the leader's going to go.
And hold on one sec. The second the on page 16 is where we are. Right hand column, right above the melee, which is 3.8. It's got a 1-word paragraph, and then it has the paragraph above it. This is again literal reading of the rule. In order for a multi-man counter to advance into a hex with an enemy AFE, it must first pass a pre-AFE task check. Is the 9-2 a multi-man counter?
No.
So he just goes on for free. He just does it for free. You got 2 9-2s in there? Damn.
No, you dragged one in there. I don't know why you did that.
Do you want the other one up
I
here?
had.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So the single man counter's going anyway. Oh, well, if he wants to. But he's not required.
So his leadership modifier can help with the patsy for both squads or only one of them?
For both squads.
For both.
All right.
For both squads.
Patsy of units they are stacked with. Units, plural.
So it's like a task check. It's a task check that he's conducting with his units.
Right. Okay, so the first squad will run that.
Slackers.
All right, so now we'll go with this. All he needed was a 10. I don't believe it.
Yeah, hell no.
So the second guy, he rolls and he goes regardless. He can't change his mind once he goes. Once he rolls for the patsy and passes, he's on.
Well, he has to decide to go then. Like if you reversed it. Let's say you wanted 2 squads on that guy because there was an infantry unit in his hex, right? Let's say, shit, I really don't want to go unless both of them go. Let's say the rolls were reversed. The top guy rolls a 5. He can't wait for the next guy to make his roll before he decides to go.
Right, he has to. Right, you pass it. You have to decide then and there whether you want to go or not. Yep.
Right. So when you pass it, you can decide to enter it or not.
But the other way around, the first guy didn't go. The second guy can then say, "Nope, that's it."
Yeah,
I'm not going to take a patsy. We're not going.
Right, and you don't have to pre-designate them. Yeah.
Right. So one goes on there, and we'll say the leader, he really wants this to happen, so he goes too.
Well, that's a great leader to do that. That's
technically the other guy that failed would be pinned.
Right. Why do you think he has to be pinned?
Because that's what it says on page 16.
No, but in terms of game sense, why do you think that he's to be pinned?
Just to remind you.
because they tried, and they that way they can't advance somewhere else.
Right. So in this case, is a perfect example. He's in the open, says, "Oh shit, I'm in the open. I can't go on. I'm screwed. I'm going over here instead." So that's why they pinned him. So it doesn't allow you to, just like you said, go somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. I missed that. All right, great. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Essentially,
Yep.
and that'll be gone when at the end of the next phase.
At the end of close combat phase.
Yeah. So pretty much it says if you fail the patsy, then you don't get to choose to advance somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
okay, cool.
and that's pretty much the reason, the game reason behind that. So anyway, we're in his hex. Let's go for this.
So now we go into close combat phase.
Yep.
Now close combat is sequential.
It's
so
sequential in the case if there's a vehicle in the hex. Yes.
Right. In this case, right, against a vehicle, not close combat squad v squad or unit v unit.
Right.
Okay. So the 628 has a 5 CCV and the leader has 1. So for a total
the
of
leader
6.
technically adds 1 to the squad. Yeah.
Or adds 1 to the squad.
Where'd you find that information out, Craig?
Well, it's in the chart for one.
Right, the chart. That's kind of where I want to go with that.
Yeah.
Always look at the chart. If when in doubt, look at the chart. Most likely it'll be there. If it's not there, it will not apply. Okay. So, but it says CCV squad 5, Sigma counter 2 doesn't apply. CCV modifiers, assault engineers +1, inexperienced -1, extra single man counter +1. That's where we're getting the +1 from the leader. Now the leader can attack by himself, but again, since it's sequential, one guy gets to attack first, and then the tank, and then technically the squad can attack, and then the leader can attack if for whatever reason you want to do that. But that's where you want to look. Close combat table. I implore you to definitely look through all those close combat modifiers. 95% of them won't ever apply, but some of them do, and some of them are very interesting. So continue, Greg.
Okay, so we've got the CCV is a 6, and the leadership modifier plays in. So basically, he rolls an 8. The tank's immobilized. He rolls a 7 or less, and the tank is destroyed. So, and hopefully, ooh.
Yay!
But let's just say it's more like Mark's roll.
There we go. Yeah. Okay.
So they don't do anything. Now it's the Panzer's turn.
Okay.
The bow machine gun, or you look at the machine guns, and the bow machine gun is not included, just the coaxial. Correct?
Correct.
Correct. Yep.
So which is 5, and you do it as a close combat ratio. So
right.
5v6. So 1 to 2. Am I doing that right?
That is correct. Yep, I believe. Yep.
So then the tank rolls on that, and same result, and now they're in melee.
Well, to be precise, the infantry unit is in melee.
Right.
Right.
So
right. The vehicle never considered in melee. Right.
So what does that mean in game terms, gentlemen? What are we looking at here? What are the consequences that we're looking at here?
So the infantry unit can't do anything now besides melee. The vehicle can do anything.
Drive out.
The vehicle can drive out. He can fight. If he stays in the hex, he can only fire in the hex.
In the hex,
he can't fire out, but he can move out.
Right.
Right.
So he could fire his gun, his machine guns, and what would firepower would those machine guns be?
Triple.
Oh, that would be triple then, right?
Tripled at your guys in the open. Well, they're not moving in the open, but that'd be a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's a danger when you're looking at something like that. The tank can freely move out. Now, if you're immobilized, that'd be one thing. So if you immobilized him and he didn't kill you, then he'd be in melee because he's unable to leave the hex. He's immobile. He's in a mobile vehicle.
Now, yeah. Okay. Yeah. He just can't leave. Yeah. So he's not.
Now take for example, you're against this unit here, and this is where you need to know your AFVs. Okay, definitely know what you're up against. Comparing these two different vehicles. Actually, I'm just going to stack them side by side. These guys go into close combat with either one of these vehicles. So, Craig attacked with the Panzer IV, the one on the right, with 5 firepower in close combat. Can the Jack Panzer V attack with his machine guns in close combat?
No.
No, because he just has the bow machine gun.
Right, he doesn't have a coaxial machine gun. But because he has the bow machine gun and it's still active, that qualifies him for having a machine gun for close combat. Because if that machine gun was malfunctioned, then he wouldn't have any usable machine guns available to him, and the squads or the enemy units attacking him would have an
Right.
extra bonus, and that's on the chart.
So that would be another -1.
That'd be another -1. But even though he can't use the weapon in close combat, it stops that negative modifier from applying. But tell me what you know about these particular vehicles.
Well, the Tiger and the and your other tank that you got in there has that.
Jagdpanzer 5. Yep.
Yep, has a Naberdatukunstwaffe,
Yep.
which is a great
Wow.
close-in weapon system.
Okay, so let's say we jump on the Jack Panzer V, and let's go through that close combat. And
So again,
let's say we've we'll go to that example in just a second. Okay. Yep. So you jump him. We're over here. You jump
Yep.
him.
okay, so we jump them, and again, it's sequential.
Right.
So we get to roll first, and
Wait.
same
Okay.
thing.
Let's go over. Okay, you jump him in the woods this time. What do we do? Or the building. Let's say we're in the
if
building.
it's in the woods, is there ambush?
Ambush.
Yep.
So
Oh.
let's roll for ambush there, because our guy's pinned over here. He didn't come along. What modifiers are we looking at?
There's Mark
yes, Mark, get it, Mark.
There you go.
Roll, Mark. Roll your 1.
Oh, here we go. All right.
Come
ready?
on, please. Yes. Yes. This is how you make Russians eat shit. Now what happens? First of all, we look at our ambush chart, correct? Is that an ambush? That's the number one thing you have to make sure. Is this an ambush? Does that look like an ambush to you? A 1 and a 6.
Oh, the Russians rolled a 6, right?
The Russians rolled a 6. The Germans rolled a 1. Do you think that's an ambush?
The Russians rolled a 4 because it'd be modified by the leadership.
Right.
Right. That's what we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
And then what are the vehicle modifiers?
+2.
+2. So it's a 3 versus a 4. The tank will never ambush anybody with a -2 leader.
Yep.
Never. We just rolled the 6-1. It's not possible. Well, unless like you're pinned and there's a whole bunch of other bullshit modifiers. You know, but if you're just normal good order units, you're just jumping just like we have here, you'll never ambush the enemy. Therefore, he will always get that first attack. Now, if they were CX, there'd be a +1 on that. That might give us a bonus. And if one of those were broken or pinned, like if the leader were, well, the squad's going to be pinned. Technically it could be if it's the next round. Well, no, it's not going to be. Well, if the vehicle enters his hex and he's in the woods, it could be. But make sure you look at the close combat or the ambush modifiers and double check all that stuff that applies, because that was the worst combination of rolls that the Russians could hope for. Yet he's still not ambushed in this sort of situation. CX, broken, pin, lax, button up. Well, he's buttoned up too, right? So that's another +1. So he's a vehicle that's buttoned up. It's +3.
Oh,
You know.
okay. +3 on his ambush roll. Okay,
Yeah, and so it's just a whole bunch of bad stuff happening. It's easy to ambush vehicles, which makes them very vulnerable, especially if they're like, if you're, you know, we won't go into concealed, but anyway, building or woods, you can ambush them pretty quickly. So what happens
All
here?
right. So again, it's sequential, and let's once again just say it's Mark rolling, and the Russians are unsuccessful against them.
Okay.
So now the Germans can counterattack. Bow machine gun doesn't play in this, but they do have in their close-in weapon system. If we can all say it together, Knifedatterkunstwaffe.
So
So,
what
however,
happens there? What happens there, Craig?
Well, it's a 16 firepower, and even if they got lucky and they sent in, all these guys, it's sequential. So that close-in weapons defense system attacks everybody in that hex at 16 firepower. So it's a 16 flat.
What happens if I had a German squad under the tank?
I think the German squad takes it too.
The German squad gets attacked as well. It attacks all units in the hex.
Now, here's a little twist that I just figured out over the last couple of days. If it's June of 1944, which happens to be the scenario Sherman moves west,
Okay.
the Germans don't have that weapon system.
Of 44? It's what
Yep.
year?
June of
Or
The-
what?
44.
That scenario,
July of 44. Yep.
July
beginning
of
in
44.
July of 44, certain German AFV are equipped with a close defense weapon system. So prior to July of 44, what they had is a mine dispensing system, which is a 12 firepower. And I believe it's operated in the rules the same way as this, but it's 12 firepower rather than 16.
Right. And how is that destiny on the counter?
It's not, which is what it's in
It's in the
both.
vehicle notes.
Well,
It's
it's not in the vehicle. Well, the mine system is in the vehicle notes, but there's nothing about July of 44. That's actually written in the rules. So in the SK rules on page 18, top of the third column, it says beginning of July 44. And in the ASL rules, it's also not in the vehicle notes. It's in the I can't remember if it's in the close combat section or where.
In starter
But
kit,
it says the
yes.
exact same thing.
In starter kit, it talks about the SN. In the vehicle notes, it describes, if you see the other vehicle that's on the board right now, that's the earlier war version. That's the earlier version, and then there's the later version. So that's the Panzer 6. The one on the bottom is the Panzer 6E. The M7 is what we're talking about, the earlier kind of like prototype version, and that will fire on the 12 firepower column, whereas the SN7 will fire on the CSS 1944. It's SN8 in 1945. So those are the values of the SN in those. And again, reading your vehicular notes, because a lot of Russian vehicles, although it doesn't apply in starter kit, a lot of Russian vehicles have radios in 43. So a lot of the vehicles that were radioless before, you think, oh, I'll just look on the back of the counter. He's screwed. He has to go in platoon movement. Well, which you guys don't know
Yep.
how it works. So
But even
always,
if you look
always
at
read
the,
it.
even if you look at the newer version of the Tiger, it says SN7 and has a 4 superscript. So it
Yeah.
leads you to believe that if it's 1944, if you don't see it, and again, it's not even in chapter H in the ASL or in the vehicle notes in SK.
It's
in the verbiage in the paragraph of the rules, the body of the rules itself.
Oh my
We have to write
gosh.
that down.
Oh my gosh.
That it's not until July of 44. So when you're playing Sherman moves west, you've got this Tiger, and I was going to go into close combat, and we started to read into it, and we're like, wait a minute, this is June, not July. It's the mine dispense system.
Yep.
So
Now,
and
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting. So it's a 12 instead of a 16.
right, and the other thing too to remember with both of those is it has a 7 for the number there. So if you roll above a 7, then that means it didn't work for you.
right,
Yeah.
So it's no result.
right, no result.
It's not an 18 on the 12 chart or an 18 or an 8 on the 16 chart.
Right.
It's a nothing.
It's a nothing. Yeah, it's like, well, it's a smoke dispenser as well. So think of it as like your smoke discharger. It either
Right.
happens or it doesn't, and you have to roll that number or less. Yeah, big difference. Yeah, I was reading that today. It's like, okay, it makes a big difference. And what happens if you roll a 12 against a let's say the 9-2 and the 6-8 roll a 12 on his attack versus the VFV? What happens, if anything? You roll the dreaded 12.
Something tells me that something bad happens, but I don't know.
Casualty reduction. You roll 12.
For everybody?
You roll 12. Well, whoever attacked, whoever rolled the 12. So whoever rolled the 12, it's like they fell onto a track or something like that. They got too close and they got run over or something like that. So then you
I
would
guess
choose
if you get a
random
leader, it's
selection.
Random
Yeah,
selection.
you do random selection, and then one guy would be casualty reduced. So don't roll 12s. Always, anything to 12 happens, bad stuff happens. Now, in regular close combat, 12, just, no effect, right? In terms in SK. I mean, other things happen in ASL, but we don't have to worry about that. But 12 versus AFVs, you will get casualty reduced, which is not good. Not good at all.
Oh yeah. Bird rolls an original 12. Attacking unit suffers casualty reduction. There you go. It's a small little thing. Yep.
So,
Okay.
and
I don't think it's ever happened to me. So.
Yeah. I try to run like a coward.
Yeah. Don't tend to jump too often. Actually, I guess I jump when I get the chance, but I think I've never actually rolled a 12. So.
Right. So if there were smoke in that hex, if somebody dropped a giant smoke round, whoosh, giant smoke round in that hex, how would that affect close combat? Anybody? How would the hindrance affect close combat?
Would it be a +3 on the
I don't think it.
weapon system? I wouldn't think so.
No effect at all. No effect at all in close combat.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Yeah.
No effect at all. So now you could smoke him, so you can get on him. I mean, that's the effect that it has. Now you have probably a much better chance of getting close to him to jump him, which again is another very usefulness of smoking your opponent's tanks. Now you can charge your infantry up there almost with impunity, and then just hopefully, if you roll your 8s and your morale checks, your PAV test checks, then you can jump him. But within close combat, it has no effect. Same thing with TM. If you're a stone building, you're not adding +3 or nothing like that. It's just you're close combat. You're on top of him. So it'd be funny if they added the rule like that. If there's smoke in there, your casualty reduced on 11 or 12 because your visibility's low. That'd be kind of cool. You'd think it would have that. So, any other questions on the close combat versus the AFV? Now, mind you, on this particular thing here, actually, we're not even done here. So you're in close combat. I'm just going to move these counters over here. So the non-vehicular player gets to attack first. So make your attack, Craig. Who are you going to attack, and what are you going to attack?
Sorry, Stu, I gotta go.
Okay, no worries. So what we have here is when you're in here and you're attacking the units in close combat with a vehicle, it's sequential, as Craig pointed out. You don't have to even attack the vehicle to still have the ability to attack first. So if we jumped in this hex, this is close combat, we can decide to go 2 squads against his squad. That's my first attack. That's going to be 3 to 1. We're going to make a roll. A 6. That'll kill that guy. So this guy gets killed first, and because it's sequential, he does not get to attack back. Then the tank gets to attack. Let's say his Naviertigungswaffe rolls like a 10 or something like that, so nothing happens. Yep. Then our squad and leader typically will combine to attack the vehicle. He'll roll to attack. A 3 will definitely destroy the vehicle. And so you can go in any combination. You could have attacked the vehicle first. In that case, his vehicle could then fire the Naviertigungswaffe, or his squad could attack. So it's whatever attack you want to choose. It's all sequential. So you get an attack, he gets an attack. You get an attack, he gets an attack. So it splits it all up in your close combat. So it could be kind of precarious. You could actually lose units before you get a chance to fire them. That's the biggest takeaway out of vehicular combat with infantry in the hex, is you can lose those other units before they even show up. If you had an 838 there, he could be taken out if you want to use your SN first. First of all, you might break him, right? So if he blows, if you attack the tank and you miss, and he fires off his Naviertigungswaffe, and let's say he breaks these other 2 guys, right? So if he breaks these 2 guys, or any combination thereof, and let's say the 467 is fine, he was fine, right? Now guess what? The 467 can attack one of the broken units with what modifier?
-2.
-2, because they're broken in close combat. At that point, he'd have a very good result on those guys at that point. So I mean, if you have 8 morale, you can blow up your own guys. Hopefully, this guy will survive. But if he does, he's going to have a very good chance of eliminating these other units.
Mhm.
So that again, distinctions in between. It's all turn-based. Non-vehicular player, then vehicular player, then non-vehicular player, then vehicular player, and then so on and so forth until all the attacks are exposed. Now, if you had normally a unit can't be attacked more than once, but let me just undo this. It's not going to undo it. Okay, whatever. So if you had 3 squads in here, in this case, all 3 squads could attack the tank individually. You would just go in sequence. Boom, 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 boom. So that tank's probably gonna get toast by the end of the day. By the end of the day. So and then we can go over. I think Craig wanted to go over also concealment and hip and how it applies to hit. I think we covered that a lot in our discussion in the of the other time, but we can go over it kind of quickly here, and because really the starter kit 4 kind of clears it up versus the starter kit 3, 2, and 1. Actually, 1's not going to matter because it doesn't have to hit. But the +2, your acquisition, your small acquisition, cannot be used against concealed or hidden units. If you had a hidden unit in this location G7, and you had that Russian unit and this tank is firing upon him, and if he's using infantry target type, then the infantry target type will only apply to the known unit. The unknown unit will not get the -1 modifier, which makes him much, much harder to hit. So if there's let's say there's a hidden infantry unit in that location. Let's see a leader were hidden. I'm gonna just hit him. He'll be low. If he's in that location there, and if this unit is not point blank, he fires on that. He's a base 8 to hit, right? +1 TEM makes it a 7, and it says he's not moving. +1 button up makes it a 6, so he'll need a 6 to hit the infantry unit. Because this unit is concealed or unknown to the firer, in this case hip, he'll need a +2 to hit him as well. So he'll need a 4 to hit everybody. A 5 or a 6 will hit the squad, but not the leader. 12 is not good. So if we hit a 5 on our to hit roll, we'll miss the infantry unit here, and that even applies to area target type as well, because you could still hit one but not the other. So if you blast the whole hex area target type, the +2 still applies for the concealed unit, because it's still not known to the firer. So he could hit this guy on a 7. This guy will be hit on a 5. So if we rolled a 5 like we had before on the bottom, then they'll both get hit, and then you'll have to roll. You'll have to roll versus both of them. At that point, it's kind of it's kind of tricky at that point in terms of game sense, right? Because let's say you hit the both, then you have to roll the IFT. What you do is you roll the IFT, and the same roll applies to both of them. So if you roll the IFT, it's a 7, right? And then it's you're either going to hit or miss them at the same time, because the TEM at this point comes into play. So that'd be an 8 on whatever chart that would be. That'd be a 16, and it would be half against the unit. So it'd be 16 against the squad. So that'd be an 8 on the squad, which would be a 1 morale check, and then half firepower versus the hidden unit. And I believe it should not have firepower at all. It's the same chart, because you've already taken that into account with the area target type. So then the hip unit would also get attacked and have to do the same morale check. At that point, since he's exposed to a morale check, the hip unit would then become unhip and then roll his morale check and then morale check.
Yep.
And that's kind of how you dig them out. But typically, like if you have a squad, you probably don't want to be stacked with a gun in there, especially if it's a high priority target. You don't want to draw fire to the gun. So most of the time, you don't want to be stacking up like that. But the area target type can hit everything in the hex and apply for the to hit ratio. But you may never, if you were only firing infantry target type, the small half incher, that will never apply to any hidden units in the hex. or concealed units if you're playing SK4. The -1 does not apply to concealed units. So if these guys were concealed, right, and I fire upon him and I miss, I don't get to put a -1 on it.
Right, you'll get an acquisition because you don't know. You
get
weren't sure whether you were firing on something or not.
Right. Now, if you had this, and if I fired on the hex, I would get a -1 acquisition, but that would only apply to the squad and not the concealed units.
Right, but if you fire area target type, you do get it.
Right, area target type applies to the entire thing.
Entire hex, right.
And you also have the detriment of trying to hit the concealed units. The concealed units are still more difficult to hit.
Mm-hmm.
But your firepower is going to be, it's not going to be 16 be half. So your firepower is going to be halved from the area target type anyway. And this particular tank is not very good at firing area target type simply because it's HE limitations. So that's kind of what we're looking at right there. That's the down and dirty version of firing at concealed units. Pretty much +2 and +2 will not to hit. If you fire machine guns, it's just like normal, right? This guy's going to be normal firepower at 8. This guy will be a 4. So you're going to roll once. And that'll apply to both of them. One's going to be on the 8 chart +1. The other one's going to be 4 chart +1.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, and this came into account in a game that I was playing, is that you as the defender, you just have to be, one, it's honor system, and you just have to be very careful.
Right.
Okay? You're the one who has to apply that modifier on your hidden unit.
Right.
And go, okay, yep, all right, you roll low enough that now I have to take you hit me as well. And that's both the honor system, and you have to remember that. And
right.
you have to calculate that separately. So you have to be looking at the chart at the same time and remembering you have to add another 2 to see whether he hits your unit that's hidden.
Absolutely. Especially if you have the size modifier. And this one might make it real easy to hit, but then this guy has a lot of modifiers applied. Even if it's -2, right? So what we need to hit this squad is, let's say he's CE, just for the hell of it. So we only have the TEM and the modifier here. So the base 8 goes down to a 7. -2 essentially makes it a 9 to hit that. But for the infantry that are concealed, we would need a base 8 +1 TEM +2 concealed. So you would need a 9 to hit the squad and a 5 to hit the concealed units.
Yep.
So as long as you keep that bouncing in your head, like Mark said, you have to be just keep up on it.
Well, the concealed aren't as bad because at least they're on the board and everybody sees it.
Right.
If it's hidden,
yeah.
Right. Then you, as the defender, you've got to do all that calculation yourself.
Yeah, in your
and
head.
Go, okay, you hit something else in the hex.
Right.
Yeah.
That could really screw up a game if you hit and break this guy and they say, okay, Bo, he rolls like a snake eyes or a 3. This guy rolls up here and they, okay, I'm gonna reveal this unit and you're dead. And the guy says, wait a minute, I just critical hit that guy. What's going on here?
Right.
You know.
Yeah, because in the game that I was playing, it was like, okay, he basically revealed his position before he realized, oh, you missed.
Oh, right.
Right. You know, and it's like, well, it's like, well, it's basically you can voluntarily lose hip status anytime, so you just put on the board, say, well, unfortunately that's your
that's your fault. That's your fault. Yeah, you can lose concealment anytime, and that's and again, that's another reason why they have that rule, is to say, well, you have that choice to lose concealment, and therefore by default you lost it because you revealed your guy.
Yep. And
so you can't quote take it back. Well, at that point your hidden guys.
Right, you're hidden, right. If he's hidden, then it's like, well, it's like, gee, I wonder where your gun is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
let me train every one of my guns on that hex now.
Yeah. So that kind of applies for that. So
that's why I say, like, hidden, especially if you've got a non-hidden unit stacked with the hidden unit, you as the defender, you've got a lot of math you have to account for. And if you're gamesmanship, you have to do it quickly, because if you take too long, you're suddenly looking down charts. The other guy's going to start wondering, what are you doing all that checking for?
Right. And if you're slow on the chart, just say, oh, I got to go to the bathroom real quick, and then just take your charts with you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And your rule book, and chapter H.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little light reading. Yeah,
Take your pie. Oh my god. A giant binder, 500 pages. So, but yeah, that'd be one way to do it. But yeah,
So I will just give you that warning. You might want to kind of have in the back of your mind what the modifiers are in total, and just kind of have that in the back of your mind so you can just instantly add that or subtract that from the die roll and instantly come up with the you hit it or no you didn't sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's good to have that kind of pre-calculated in your mind. So
And
I just throw that out as a good sort of good hint for defenders.
Right, and in anything prior to SK4, the only hidden or concealed unit, quote, concealed unit, is going to be just your guns, unless there's some sort of weird SSR. Sometimes you'll have units that are hip. I think John played one where with the OBA one.
Yep, sure did.
There's some hip units in there. And and then Mark played one as well with Stackberg with some hip units. But although there weren't anything to hit in that one, but there's no actual to hit possibilities in those at all. So they're just hidden units. But same thing applies. There might be some weird scenarios out there. I'm sure there are. There's a whole bunch of them out there where you just definitely need to keep that in mind. And as your experience grows more with ASL, you'll know that pretty much just kind of like, as long as there's no acquisition on the unit there, just say, okay, +2. Before he rolls, like, oh, what do you need to hit again? Oh, I need a 7 to hit your unit. And then you just go, okay, he needs a 7 there. If he rolls a 5, he'll hit the other guy. And so therefore that sort of thinking and calculation will come +2 worse for my guys that he can't see. And then boom, you go from there. And it's really not that bad, but it's just a matter of remembering, especially if it's face to face where, you may not even remember you have a hidden unit there because it's written down somewhere.
Yeah, that's where Vassal at least is a lot
it's huge.
nicer about that. At least you see that,
Yeah, it's really nice.
See that it's there, yeah.
Well, any other questions or comments, gentlemen? I think we had a really good rule dives today, and I think they were. I enjoyed them. I think they were really informative. So.
Well, good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that, I've got nothing else to add. Do you guys have anything else to add? We're hitting 7:30. We're close.
Yeah. No, I don't think that. Yeah, I think I had everything that I don't want to talk about this week. So yeah, I think we're all set.
Okay. Did I put up another game of the month one? What do you want?
Yet.
Okay. There's some discussion. I don't think I would much rather do some more. There might be some players here that don't use arm at all. But if we want to do some more combined arms, there's a lot of them out there. I'd hate to go back to early battles, and I think some people have made some suggestions of the scenarios, of what's other scenarios that might be fun for the players involved. Again, I don't have those scenarios, so I can't post them or do whatever. But if you guys have a scenario that you either haven't tried or have played and you thought it was really fun and exciting that you'd be willing to play again, we can get into that. Hey, we had some good questions. Thanks for showing up. Hopefully you'll come next week. I think we're going to be doing some game of the month stuff. We might be changing some things up a little bit in terms of just kind of content, maybe something like that. Let me know what you guys might want to see in content, and then show up to Tactical Tuesday. Bring your thoughts, bring your ideas, bring your scenarios with some weird occurrences that happen in your scenarios, or say, hey Stu, I was doing great in the scenario, got at the end, and we screwed up. What do we do, guys? And everyone here will help figure out how to clean up, how to kind of end those scenarios on a good positive note, and go with that. So, all right, thanks for joining us for Tactical Tuesday. Thanks for all the guys that are participating every single week that keeps it going and helps cause a good learning environment for myself, and as well as all the other people that are here. So thanks for watching. Thanks for showing. Support. You've got Patreon and everything else like that. Patreon, Vows with Stu, and things like that. So thanks a lot, guys. It helps a lot. Keeps the engine rolling, and we'll catch you next week on Tactical Tuesday.